If someone does something bad to us, our immediate reaction is frequently to want to do something similar, if not worse, in response. We want to make him pay, to experience a similar pain. However, revenge is not always the best way. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a dialogue between King Parikshit and Dharma, who appeared in the form of a bull. In this dialogue, there is an enigmatic passage that I struggled to understand for a long time. The king said, "O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetration of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personality of religion." At first, this passage doesn't seem to make much sense. It appears that it implies that if someone is victim of some crime or violence and he reports the perpetrator asking for justice, he is entitled to receive the same punishment reserved for the criminal. Like, for example, if a man that is stabbed with a knife would be forced to spend 10 years in prison alongside the criminal that stabbed him. How could this be called justice? To understand this cryptic verse, first we need to understand the context. We saw briefly the story of Parikshit in a previous video. He was the emperor of the world 5,000 years ago and was fighting to contain the dark influence of the age of Kali from engulfing our planet. When he traveled through the earth, he met Dharma, the embodiment of all moral and spiritual principles that had taken the form of a bull. Besides him, Bhumi, the personification of Mother Earth, had taken the form of a cow. Both were mercilessly beaten up by Kali, the personification of all vices and cruelty of this age, who was dressed like a king. Apart from being a representation of how, in this age, politicians and other authorities abuse their power and exploit the citizens instead of giving them protection, this was also a true event that happened in a subtle dimension. Parikshit Maharaj, as a virtuous king, could not stand still after observing this scene. He is in charge of protecting the citizens against rogues, and therefore he takes his sword and prepares to punish the offender. To get evidence, he asks the bull to tell who was beating him. It seems like an obvious situation. Kali is right there with a club in hand, and the bull is all blooded, with 3 of his legs broken. It seems like a clear case of flagrant delicto, where the criminal is caught with red hands. However, when the king asked the bull to point out the culprit, he started speaking in a cryptic way instead of giving a direct answer. O greatest among human beings, it is very difficult to ascertain the particular miscreant who has caused our sufferings, because we are bewildered by all the different opinions of theoretical philosophers. Some philosophers, who deny all sorts of duality, declare that one's own self is responsible for his personal happiness and distress. Others say that superhuman powers are responsible, while yet others say that activity is responsible, and the gross materialists maintain that nature is the ultimate cause. There are also some thinkers who believe that no one can ascertain the cause of distress by argumentation, nor know it by imagination, nor express it by words. O sage amongst kings, judge by yourself by thinking over all this with your own intelligence. This is actually a very deep philosophical point. If something happens to us, who is the culprit? Would it be the subtle laws of nature that propel the criminal? Would it be Mother Nature herself? Would actually be ourselves because we are receiving the karmic result of some action we performed in the past? Maybe it's just chance and therefore there is no culprit at all. An essential point to be able to understand this mystery is that the law of karma works in a circular way. We perform a certain action, let's say we violently attack someone, for example. The person desires revenge, and at a certain point in some future life, the roles are reversed. We become the victim, and the victim becomes the aggressor. We then desire revenge, and in some future life the roles are switched again. We can see that it becomes a loop. In fact, we are caught in this circle since time immemorial, sometimes being in the position of the aggressor, sometimes in the position of the victim. Someone that is a victim of some violence has a right to desire justice. The problem is that to take revenge means to stay in this material world, and thus remain in this karmic loop. That's why it's said that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. Both have to remain here, one to receive the results of his action and the other to get revenge. That's why a spiritualist is advised to just tolerate the result of his past karma without becoming disturbed. By forgiving, he breaks the circle. He suffers the reaction of something he did in the past, but without the desire for revenge, he doesn't become entitled to be in the reverse position in the future. Thus, he becomes free. Christ explained this higher principle when he spoke about turning the other cheek in the Sermon on the Mount. This may sound like some kind of impractical pacifism at first, but it actually describes the rationale of a saintly person. If I'm actually receiving justice for some wrongdoing I did in the past, what's the point of blaming the person that was used as an instrument? It would be like hitting myself with a hammer and then blaming the hammer for what happened. But how could we apply this in a practical way? Let's say someone in our community is attacked. Should we just cross our arms and accept that he just received the result of his karma and that the perpetrator is actually innocent, being just an instrument? Of course not. While the victim may act like a saint and just tolerate the offense without becoming revengeful, the proper authorities have the duty of finding and punishing the perpetrator, otherwise they become punishable by the laws of karma for neglecting their duty. As A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada explains in his commentary, this punishment by the proper authorities is also good for the criminal, since if he is punished now, he will not have to suffer the consequences of his acts in the future. We can see this illustrated in this story. While Dharma refrained from being angry and accusing Kali, King Parikshit was ready to punish the offender with his sword. That was his duty as a king. Thus, this mysterious passage of Srimad Bhagavatam actually teaches us a higher principle.